My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beefporkribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds or geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic multiverses, mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope. Beefporkribs, last week I forgot to give props to my brother and his girlfriend for the amazing Christmas gift they gave me. I just showed it to you for the first time. Would you care to describe it for our listeners?
It is a comforter made of a patchwork of nerdy or geeky t-shirts, which I think may have been handpicked for you specifically.
Yes, it was so great.
Yes.
So
it is quite impressive.
And the other side of it is quite actually cozy and nice and warms, and I've been using it for a few weeks now, so I can confidently say top-notch, best Christmas gift of the year.
It's just...
Yeah, sorry Santa and everyone else who gave me Christmas gifts, but that's definitely number one. And so, brother King Boo, as he was called when he was on the show, if you're listening, thank you. It's a very great gift. Beefporkribs, we're starting our trip down memory lane, looking back at the last decade of nerd and geek culture, starting, of course, with the year 2010. Now, this is quite literally 10 years ago now as we record. Do you remember what you were doing in 2010?
I mean, specifically, no. I was in my first year of university, so generally I kind of know. But, yeah, I don't know. I was watching a lot of anime, actually.
See, I remember finishing high school in like June of 2010 and then starting university in fall of 2010. So I can't remember. I think we finished school around the same time, but maybe you...
I mean, I technically finished school in May. I mean, not really. I technically finished in June like everybody else, but because I did the International Baccalaureate program, our exams were all over by the end of May. So the last month of school, I permanently had my Nintendo 64 in my backpack every day, and we'd look for TVs to play.
Wow, the days before better consoles, I suppose. So my recollection of this year, to be honest, it's kind of... not the best. I'm not the best at remembering things. So as we go through this list of nerdy and geeky culture items, my memory might not be the best. I think
that's all right.
I have a condition called sometimers where I forget things sometimes.
I have a decent memory for facts, but not events. So that probably will come into play there too. I was really surprised though, looking up some of the movies and video games and things that were going on in 2010. I know. We're in 2020 now. Yeah, it was really weird. Also, a lot of good movies came out that year.
Well, we're going to start with the video games because we generally don't talk about video games very much on the show. We're very bad at covering video game news and having video game focused episodes. So I'm going to go through the top 5 best-selling games of the year, and we'll just kind of mention them briefly.
Yeah.
I think it's good to continue with the whole tradition of bat cookie or bat-noogie. So,
all right, we'll go for that.
So the 5th most best-selling game of 2010 was Red Dead Redemption.
Really? Number 5? I thought it'd be higher.
Well, this list from IGN is accounting for all sale across all consoles and systems.
Right.
So Red Dead Redemption is a video game that was only available on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3.
That makes sense.
So in terms of cumulative sales for all platforms, it's number 5.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, especially because it wasn't for PC, which tends to bump up the sales, especially of late.
I've never played this game. I'm not. It's like a Western.
It's like a Western shooter game, sort of adventuring-ish. It's like I think I played it once, but it's basically like, I don't know. From what I remember, it's more like kind of like Metal Gear, but in the Western world. Not so much for the sneaking around, but for the like. I'm thinking more.
Is it like Trigun?
If only. No, but it is kind of open world adventure-ish, but with a pretty, like a fairly well-structured story. And I know that the second one came out, like maybe a few years ago, and did also very well. Like, it was super well-received, and people were expecting it, and people were like, yes, another one. And people were very excited, even people who aren't, cowboy fans. So
I'm not a huge gamer, so this gets a bat-noogie for me.
I think... I mean, personally, I didn't enjoy it that much, but I think that if we were looking at like a countdown of things, are they still relevant? Do they still work? I think it gets a bat cookie for that, because it is still, Red Dead Redemption 2 also was,
we'll talk about that when we get to
yeah.
that year, whenever it is. Number 4 was New Super Mario Brothers Wii.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't play it. Not a fan of Mario games.
Played
like
it.
That.
It's not one of the better Mario games. It's not one of the worst either. It's kind of like, it was a Nintendo game. It sold well.
Bat-noogie for me.
Yeah, sure. We'll say bat-noogie because there were better games than Nintendo did in this decade.
Number 3, Halo Reach.
I've
never played a Halo game.
Not even Combat Evolved.
I've just never had any Xbox consoles. So
yeah, Combat Evolved was a big PC game.
I don't play PC games either. So
but you were in high school when it came out.
that literally, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Bat-noogie for me, but maybe you can give it some positive things.
Reach was interesting. I mean, Reach is a prequel to Combat Evolved, which was the first Halo game that came out. And it kind of it started going into the lore of the Spartans, which the other games were kind of not as big into. I mean, it was also more depicting the war against the Covenant and how it started and what was going on just before. So basically, at the beginning of the first Halo, you're on a ship that is escaping from Reach, which was a planet controlled by the humans, which the Covenants had just taken over. And you're running away and you find this place, the Halo, and then that kind of kicks off all the events for the rest of it. But it kind of gave the backdrop to what was happening before Halo started. It did very well, as I recall, and it was one of the more fun ones. Had good multiplayer, which usually the Halos are judged largely on their multiplayer capacity, and that Halo Reach was one of the very good ones, and I believe a pretty good co-op as well.
All right, well, you've convinced me to give this a bat cookie.
Yeah. It's not Halo 3, so it's... Anyway.
Number 2, Madden NFL 11.
bat-noogie. All EA Sports except for FIFA 2000 get a bat. Oh, and what was it? Superbike 97 or something like that. I don't remember, but there's like 2 EA Sports games that I ever actually liked, and one of them was FIFA 2000 because I played it a lot as a kid.
I mean, it says something that it was popular enough that it actually is one of the top selling games across 5 different platforms.
Yeah, but that's actually pretty common for like a sport game to be like, like NBA NK10 or whatever. I don't know what they're called, but like EA Sports does tend to get at least one game that does really well almost every year. So it's like,
Yeah, bat-noogie for me. I don't like football, so.
Well, I don't like football and I don't like EA Sports, so.
It's in the game.
Yeah, it is.
And the top selling video game of 2010 was Call of Duty Black Ops.
I don't like that game. I'm not big on shooters, but I can acknowledge that Black Ops still is an iconic game that people still play, and it's still kind of the standard for those games. So, bet cookie for its accomplishment, bet noogie personally.
So, from my understanding, the original Call of Duty was like World War II, and then they made Modern Warfare, which was like modern day, and then Black Ops was like not the Cold War, but like the Vietnam War. Is that the idea?
I think so. I think it's also I could be wrong, but I think it is the first one that had zombie mode.
Oh, yes.
Because that was definitely a big thing that people loved about it. I don't know, maybe it perfected it, maybe it was the first one to have it, but I know that Black Ops was one where zombie mode, everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
It's literally a version of the game where you, instead of shooting other people, you're shooting zombies.
Yeah. That come in hordes infinitely.
Yeah.
It's not bad. I've played that a few times.
Yeah, I've never really enjoyed shooting games myself, but I know my brother King Boo, who he mentioned earlier, has always been into Call of Duty, and I remember him playing Black Ops and being really into it. So yeah, any other video games from that year you want to just give a shout out to? You made a big old list here.
Oh man, can I look at the list for a second, because I feel like there were some. I remember that a bunch of games were being remade for like the Wii and the Game Boy Advanced, which that's about where we
Probably
were.
the DS.
The DS 2. Super Mario Galaxy 2. I mean, the first one definitely made a bigger impact, but it wasn't bad. Oh, I did like that Plant vs. Zombie came out. Like, that's been out for 10 years now. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, a bunch of the Phoenix Wright games got remade, which I absolutely love those games.
I'm seeing a lot of sequels here. Civ 5, God of War 3, Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, and Civ 5 is actually still
StarCraft 2.
A pretty big one. Yeah, that's the one. That's kind of a big deal. StarCraft 2, Wings of Liberty. I mean, StarCraft has been such a big deal. Like, it's not single-handedly, but it is one of the biggest factors in esports being a thing was competitive StarCraft, and StarCraft 2 was kind of an addition to that. It didn't do as well in some ways because it didn't like dominate the market as much, but it was still one of the higher competitive games. And especially before League of Legends and Hearthstone kind of started taking over the market, it was it was the game, and it was the Blizzard game to be playing. And
is this the game that's like one of the official sports of South Korea?
I think so, yeah. It's also, interestingly enough, it was originally supposed to be a Warhammer game, which is why, like, there's Space
Warhammer
Marine.
Warhammer
40K. It's a tabletop mini-war gaming game.
Just for people who don't know what that is.
Yes. And that's why, like, basically it was supposed to be the Imperium, so the Space Marines. The Zergs were, and even if you look at them right now, do kind of look like the Tyranids from Warhammer 40K. And you had I don't remember what they're called in StarCraft anymore, but they're basically the Eldars. They're basically space elves, and it was quite interesting. But apparently, at the time, a tabletop gaming company thought that a video game wasn't serious enough and wasn't capable of making the kind of profit or the kind of market they wanted, and so they didn't. It ended up just being a different game. But yeah, StarCraft 2 was a big one for me to find there. I was like, huh. But I also remember it because I got it that year, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was a thing. I remember getting StarCraft 2 because it was a real-time strategy game, and I used to play Age of Empires 2 and 3 a lot, and then I was like, oh, this is not as good. I'm never playing it again. So it is definitely as good. It's just a completely different style of gameplay, which I wasn't used to and I don't enjoy as much.
The only video game that I want to mention from 2010 was one of the only ones I actually remember playing at the time was Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions.
Oh.
And it was like, I didn't even own a PlayStation 3, but I bought a copy of the game for the PlayStation 3, and I remember going over to like other people's houses.
Who was that guy?
Yeah, to play this game. Now, I didn't buy it when it first came out. I actually bought it like years later, but the game did get released in 2010, and why that's significant for me, at least, is that it was my first introduction to characters like Spider-Man Noir, and reintroduced me to Spider-Man 2099, who of course have appeared in the Spider-Verse movies. I say Spider-Verse movies because the sequel has been announced. So if you guys are listening to this in the future, way after the Spider-Verse sequels come out, at the time of our recording, there's only the one Spider-Verse movie that's been released. Anyway, it was a fun game. You got to play as 4 different Spider-Men and go through different levels, and they all had different special abilities, and the level design was different based on like what kind of environment you're in. So like Spider-Man 2099's in the future, so everything's sci-fi.
Yeah.
Spider-Man Noir, it's like all stealth. All I have to say, let's move on to TV shows. Oh, sorry, Call of Duty. Did we give it cookies or noogies?
I think it deserves a cookie for what it's managed to accomplish. And still be, and it, of the list, like most of the other ones, like their sequels are still doing well, but as far as I know, Black Ops itself, even though there is a Black Ops 2, the original still is doing well on its own merit. So I think that's pretty impressive.
When looking back at TV shows, it's kind of interesting because, of course, the way television seasons work in the United States and Canada is it starts in the fall of one year and it ends in the spring of the other, so like a school year. So for us to talk about, successful TV shows or new TV shows, you could arguably talk about shows that start either in like fall 2010 during that fall season or shows that started, during the previous 2009-2010 season. But here's the best information we could find. I found a list from the website The Daily Beast,
Okay.
which counted down the most watched TV shows of the year 2010. And I think this is very funny. So number 5 is Survivor.
Oh yeah, that's a thing. Is that still ongoing?
It's still ongoing.
Of course it is. Yeah, no, that. But people did used to, like, I do remember in high school, like, people did still talk about TV shows, like, before Netflix and before, binge watching on, on websites was a thing. There were still people who talked about. I feel like Lost was a really big one around that time, so it's probably on that list.
Number 4, NCIS.
Oh wow,
still on today.
Yeah, still.
And spoiler, this is the only show on the list that is not like a reality show or a sporting thing. So I think it speaks to at least in the United States, to the popularity of my mom still watches it. Anytime I've sat down and watched an episode over the years, I enjoy it. Like, I don't think it's bad. I just think it's kind of unrealistic to suggest that there's that much crime that needs to be investigated within like the U.S. Navy.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, what was Murder, She Wrote. Like, there's, like, I think
Are you going to talk
almost
about Murder, She Wrote in a negative way?
No, I'm just saying the suspension of disbelief really has to be there to believe that there were literally hundreds of murders that happened around this one person,
Right?
in such a short amount of time, right? It's like, because that show went on for a while and they did a lot of episodes,
And I'm happy they did.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great show. I love it, but it's also like at some point she attracts disasters, like even more so than some other famous detectives. And it's a problem I have with all detective show where it isn't like like somebody who's specifically working for like a crime in the criminal system, like all the amateur sleuths, but just happen to be around hundreds of people dying. And it's like, at some point, they're the problem.
That's true.
Just don't spend time with them.
Number 3 most watched TV show, Dancing with the Stars.
I mean, in 2010, I mean, YouTube existed. So, like, people did have other options of things to watch. But, like, wow, that's...
Number 2, Sunday Night Football.
Completely unsurprising, though.
Yeah, because really, like sporting event, and maybe that's why a lot of these shows are successful, because they're things that they're event television.
Yeah.
Because number 1's American Idol.
Really?
Like, that's not really a show you can like put on Netflix for a whole season and just binge your way through. Like,
well, you could, but it wouldn't work because it's a show that is made for TV and that kind of is dependent on it is dependent on being a weekly thing where you like follow the things around, right? It's not like it isn't a lot of these shows are not story based either per se, right?
No,
and
they're not.
episodal based things, even if there's like reality TV show especially, it's like you wouldn't binge through it if you didn't have like the suspense and the like, oh my gosh, I wonder who's gonna win. Like if you, because basically, and I don't know if this is a common thing, but I know like my brother and I, we like watch the season finales of a few seasons of American Idol and we're like, yeah, we just want to see the end result because it doesn't really matter that much.
Well, I think even by 2010, American Idol had been on long enough that it wasn't winning American Idol wasn't the only way to become famous, because by that point there were runners up or people finishing 4th place who ended up becoming superstars themselves. So I think this was around the point I kind of was like, well, it doesn't matter if you win or not, because even just getting on the show, you're getting exposure and you could still get a deal.
I mean, I never cared about the show to begin with, so.
I mean, I think of the year that Adam Lambert and Chris Allen were like the final 2, and Chris Allen actually won American Idol. But nowadays, Adam Lambert is a much more well-known singer. So it's like, well, does winning American Idol actually matter?
I mean, no.
Exactly. So,
It's kind of disappointing, actually, as far as a top 5 list. Yeah.
So this is you have cookies and nuggies. Survivor.
Oh, Noogie.
Nuggie.
Spoiler,
NCIS.
They're all getting noogies. Noogie.
I give NCIS a cookie. Never liked Dancing with the Stars, so that gets a nuggie.
Oh, definitely.
Sunday Night Football. Again, I don't watch football, so.
Well, Dancing with the Stars, there's a British version of it, which is apparently funnier, which most British versions of American TV shows are.
And I'll give American Idol a bad cookie. Why not? Hopefully, we don't have to talk about it too many times in this series of episodes.
We'll just find a different way to make our lists if that's what happens.
Okay, and here's a list of TV shows of note that started in 2010 that I thought would be interesting to go through. So The Walking Dead started in 2010.
I remember looking that up. That's interesting. It's also that was like a big deal.
Yeah, I feel like it didn't like it wasn't because I can't remember when, but at a certain point it was like one of the most popular shows on TV. But I think it took a while for it to get there.
It took a few seasons, but it also dropped down pretty significantly afterwards too. I feel like it was around season 3. I'm just going around like remembering what actually happens in the show. There
was like a zombie craze
Netflix,
for a while.
So yeah. And I remember, like, I distinctly remember around that time, like, Chapters was having a lot of, like, zombie books and zombie survival and everything was, but all of that has died down now. And, like, most people that I talk to about The Walking Dead, they're like, yeah, around season 4, 5, 6, people stopped watching it. And it was, like, it was super hyped at first and people loved it. And then it was just like, oh, yeah, this is kind of bad.
So it aired on a channel called AMC, which I didn't have access to. So I only really discovered the show years later on Netflix.
Yeah, the same thing with me.
So,
but I do remember people talking about it. It's a similar thing with the other big AMC show there, Breaking Bad. Like I never watched it when it was airing, but I was aware of it.
You saw it on Netflix afterwards. Yeah. And Mad Men. That's where I saw Mad Men too.
I have watched, I think, 3 episodes of Mad Men. I really should get around. I like John Hamm a lot, so.
Number 2, the remake of Hawaii 5-0. I've never watched this.
No
right.
idea.
Bat-noogies? We'll give Walking Dead a cookie, but then Hawaii 5-0 a nuggie.
A nuggie. Yeah, let's go for that.
Okay, Sherlock started in 2010.
Oh, yes. And it was good in 2010.
I've only seen, like...
the first season of Sherlock was good, though.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. It bothers me that they call 90-minute movies episodes.
It's also a thing the BBC does, though.
I guess.
Like
it's an interesting modern day take on Sherlock Holmes, certainly, and they sort of present him as if he has like a mental health condition,
which Sherlock Holmes kind of. I mean, yeah.
They present him as almost if he has like kind of like an Asperger's.
They make it a lot more relatable and explicit than, but I mean, if you read Sherlock Holmes, I mean, the guy clearly has some kind of an issue or issues. They just don't explore it as much because it's not really a common thing. Also, I mean, it put Benedict Cumberbatch on the map, which of course, for better or for worse, I think for better, honestly, because I mean, have you seen clips of him as Smaug, like in the motion capture suit for The Hobbit? It's hilarious. It's great.
Downton Abbey started in 2010. I've only been exposed to the show through the movie that came out last year, which I enjoyed. So, and I know a lot of people liked the TV show.
It was. I feel like every parody, like there's a bunch of TV shows that like parodied it. Like I know Family Guy did it, and Gravity Falls did it as well. They would like have these like American people. How I Met Your Mother also did it. It's like American people watching a show about like a certain era of British aristocracy and be like, oh my gosh, this is so extraordinary. I wonder who is the person who stole the prize from the lily planting competition, or like ridiculous things like that. And I'm like, I feel like that hits pretty close to home as to how people reacted to Downton Abbey. Not in a bad way per se. I mean, I watched a lot of it with my parents. I wouldn't have watched it if my parents weren't watching it, but like, it was good. It was well constructed TV. It was good drama. Sometimes a little forced, but not like Grey's Anatomy levels of forced.
All right, let's try and focus on just the seasons of that time.
That's true.
Blue Bloods started in 2010.
Never watched that one.
I just know that Tom Selleck's in it and that he's like the old veteran. I think they're either cops or firefighters.
I feel like they're cops.
Yeah, the title I guess suggests blue blood. Anyway, I'm sure it's fine. I don't even,
Yeah.
and I don't know how long it went on for, so I'll give it a cookie. I like Tom
Oh,
Selleck.
I'll go for Cookie. Oh, also Cookie for Downton Abbey. It did great.
Adventure Time with Jake and Finn started in 2010.
Yeah. Oh.
This is a show I never got into, but people around me did, so I was aware of it, and I've been forced to watch episodes. And
I recently, a few months ago, finally finished watching it all with my fiance, because it ran for like 10 seasons. I think exactly 10 seasons.
it says it ran for 8 years,
8
so
years?
it might have had many seasons.
I think it
than
had
that.
9 seasons then perhaps. But anyways, it's an amazing show. I love it. I love so many things about it. I particularly like the fact that my friends and I had found the pilot on YouTube before they made a show out of it. And when they announced it, we kind of lost our marbles. We were like, oh my God, they're making this. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's Adult Swim. So it's not just going to be for children. It's not a kid's TV show. It's similar to Steven Universe, but less musical, or something like Rick and Morty, but not as extreme. It was the kind of like the first one to kind of tackle serious things in an absurdist way and in a very subtle way. And so like a lot of the episodes were just very chill and very weird, but they kind of hit on things that, makes you feel things and makes you think about life. And the first season wasn't great compared to later season. The last few seasons weren't amazing.
I feel like a lot of TV shows are like that. It take them a while to like find.
But I love the concept of Adventure Time, and like the fact that it was very open world. They could do just about anything they wanted, and it had 2 main cast members that had to be part of it, which they eventually even broke off of. But like it was Jake the dog and Finn the human having adventures in this weird post-apocalyptic world and just running with it, and I love it.
So Bat Cookie.
Bat Cookie. Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite TV shows.
Young Justice started in 2010, which longtime listeners of this podcast know how much I love Young Justice and how excited I was when it got revived by DC Universe. And everyone knows how I spent my vacation in Florida last year binge watching the first half of the 3rd season of Young Justice. That's only available on DC Universe, and it is not available anywhere in Canada. I'm very happy the show was started. I don't know if you've ever actually seen it.
I think I saw the entire first season. It's a solid show, definitely. And one of DC's good one. I mean, DC's always been really good at animated things. It's always baffled me how like Marvel was supposed to be the super kids friendly one, but like they did, I don't know, Batman the Animated Series, Young Justice, Justice League Unlimited. Like there's so many good
Static
DC
Shock.
shows. Yeah, it's funny.
My Little Pony Friendship is Magic started in 2010.
Oh,
the show that started the whole brony community, the whole brony fandom. There's now brony-themed Comic-Cons.
Do you consider yourself officially a brony?
Not anymore, no.
Okay.
I've even by the time the movie came out 3 years ago and we covered it on the podcast, I was like, yeah, I've exited the brony.
But you have had a brony phase.
Yeah, and it wasn't when the show first came out. Like in 2000, it was more so like end of 2012, 2013.
Okay.
2014 maybe.
I remember watching, like, I've watched episodes of it, and I'm like, I mean, if I had a daughter, I'd let her watch this, or a son. Like, I'd let my kids watch this. There's nothing inherently bad about it. It's a pretty solid show, but it's also not my type of show. But as far
John
as
Delancey in
but
it.
as far as like kids show go, it's like
There's
it's
Doctor
not like
Who Easter eggs.
ham-fisted. Yeah, it's not like super preachy. It's not too stupid either. It's like it does strike a good balance in
There's
being
Pokemon
like a
references.
Good, yeah, no, it's a good show. It's solid, but I wouldn't go as far as watching it myself at my time of life. But not everybody can be a brony.
Bat Cookie for me.
Oh yeah, it's a Bat Cookie. It was a good show.
All right, you mentioned here that Lost ended in 2010.
Yeah, and everybody was really upset about it.
Yeah, we did an episode on Lost like a good few years ago now, and I remember that was one of the things that was mentioned is how people don't like the ending.
Cause didn't the writers were like, too many people on the internet were like, oh, we know what the ending is, and it's this, and the writers were like, no, it isn't, and then it was, and everybody was kind of disappointed by that.
Oh.
I don't know I vaguely I do remember Lost being such a big deal when I was in high school, and everybody was like, oh my gosh, you watched Lost, and I was always said no, because I still have not watched a single episode of Lost, and I don't think I ever will.
So bat-noogies?
in a sense, like, I feel like you had to get into it when it was airing. And at that time, it might have been good. But now, I feel no need to
You put on
review
here,
it.
Scrubs ends, but not really? What does that mean?
So, like, Scrubs is one of my favorite TV shows. And technically, it ended in 2011 because there was a last-ditch effort. Or maybe this was the last-ditch effort. I can't remember exactly why I wrote it. But basically, the show ended, and it ended very well. It was a great wrap-up episode. And then there was another season in which half the cast didn't return, and they tried to introduce a new main character, and it was called Med School. So it was basically following the same concept, but the hospital had been torn down. The hospital building had been torn down, and now all the characters who were returning were working at a med school, and the main character was a med student because Scrubs
Sounds
had
like
started.
a spinoff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It should have been a spinoff, and so some people consider it a spinoff, some people don't. So,
All right. But so like
basically, yeah.
mainstream Scrubs ended in 2010?
Exactly, yeah. And that was a wonderful, wonderful time. It was a great show. I love it.
So Bat Cookie?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it a Bat Cookie. MasterChef? Did MasterChef start in 2010?
I think, yeah, which I feel like it's in the same vibe of like American Idol. It's like one of those shows that like it's cool, but like I wouldn't necessarily binge watch it. I also don't like food shows that much.
What?
But
Love 'em.
MasterChef has had like 4 or 5 different spin-offs in
Yeah.
like different countries, so I feel like it was noteworthy.
Pretty Little Liars? I've never seen it. Bat-noogie.
I watched the first episode because I liked a girl who liked it.
There you go. That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Now, this is an
I
animated
put
series.
that there for you.
Thank you.
'cause
Yeah,
I figured you
it
would.
started in 2010, and it got unceremoniously canceled after 2 years when Disney took more control over the animation of Marvel. So, yeah, it's a better version. It's like a pre-MC. Like if you watch any Marvel cartoon made now, you can see the MCU influence all over it. Whereas with Earth's Mightiest Heroes, it's a take on the Avengers that's not as concerned about adapting the movies as it is just actually just telling the stories from the comics.
I like that though. I feel like that it's a loss to not have kept that because I don't know. It's a weird thing that they're trying to uniformize. That's not a word, but you know they're starbucking Marvel. You know, making everything the same, and I feel like it's just
Franchising?
Franchising, yeah, we'll go with that. But like, I feel like it does a great disservice to the history and to what comics are. You know, because they're not the same story told over and over again. They are very different stories told, which is why like I don't have a major problem with like all the Spider-Man movies always redoing his origin story, or like 3 or 4 different Batmans having the origin, and why like. Even though I didn't like it at the time, I have no inherent problem with like the Joker movie having Bruce Wayne's parents getting shot. It was a bit forced, and I feel like they didn't need it for the movie to work. In fact, the movie might have worked a little better if they didn't have it, but you know, they can put it in there.
All right, we're going to move on to anime now. Anime that came out in 2010. Anime is also a weird thing to try and talk about for a year because there are within a calendar year, the Japanese TV schedule doesn't follow the American schedule where it's based on like the school year. It kind of starts.
Well, the school year in Japan is also different because the school year is based around the fiscal year in Japan.
Right. So in a given year, like in 2010, there were 4 distinct seasons where new anime started and ended. And some of these shows started in 2010 and then continued on to later years. So we'll obviously mention that like we did with these other shows.
There's only one that I really found to be very noteworthy, but that was in America, not in
Japan.
Yeah.
Well, I found a blog that did they like did all the work to like get a bunch of people to vote on what were the best anime of 2010.
Okay.
So
let's look at it.
Top 5 here. Number 5, Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt.
Oh yeah, that's.
Now this is of course based on when these shows were airing in Japan. If they get brought over to the West, it usually takes at least a year. So with Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt, this is a very vulgar, crass show. I have admittedly watched it in English. not in 2010. It would have been years
funny,
later.
Though.
It is, yeah. There's humor for sure.
I feel like at its best, it's Rick and Morty, and at its worst, it's Rick and Morty.
Yeah,
like it has the same like thing where it is hit and miss on just being rude.
Yes, and what makes it unique among anime is that it doesn't look like a conventional like if you were to watch this, you would swear it was like an Adult Swim show.
Yeah, that's true.
It looks more like the Powerpuff Girls or Rick and Morty than it does, Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, that's true.
Zed.
Was it Madhouse?
I think so.
I think so too, because I do recall, because it does kind of, the art style is slightly reminiscent of Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill. Not quite there, but more similar to that than other anime styles.
So, I mean, it's not a show I'm in a position to rewatch now because I'm in a different place in my life.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'd rewatch it, but
it was entertaining for the time, so I guess I have to give it a bad cookie.
I'll give it a bad cookie. It was fun. It was good trash.
The fourth most rated anime of 2010, Katanagatari, which I'm not even sure what that.
Do you have the American name?
Well, here's the thing. I think this show never actually got licensed.
Oh, yeah. So that'd be unfortunate, because this, was before Crunchyroll was a thing and simulcast and all those wonderful things we have these days where we can get subbed anime a week after it comes out in Japan, or less now, I think.
Yeah, it's based on a light novel, and it's about sword fighting and whatnot.
I could tell that from the title, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, it hasn't been licensed in North America, so we've never seen it here.
Fair enough.
Third, so I guess Cookie or Noogie.
It's a Schrodinger's cookie.
Okay, I like it. Third top-rated anime of 2010, K-On! With 2 exclamation marks.
Oh, okay.
Now, this is a good example of a type of anime called cute girls doing cute things. Because...
Oh, yes. Sorry, I was thinking of Saiki K.
No.
Yeah, okay. Totally different.
No, K-On! Is literally about a bunch of high school girls who decide they want to start a band. And so it's about them just living their high school lives and starting a band and learning how to play instruments.
Yeah.
And they're all drawn very cute looking, and they all do cute things.
Bat-noogie, because Beck Mongolian Chop Squad is a better version of that show.
It's fair.
Have you seen Beck?
Yes, I have.
It's a good show.
Yeah. I've never actually watched this thing. You see clips and memes and pictures of it, so you know what it is. So
the memes.
That's enough for me to say it's not my thing. Number 2, second most rated anime of 2010, Durarara.
Oh, yes.
Also with 2 exclamation marks in the title.
Durarara is. Have you watched it?
Yes, I've watched it.
Yeah,
and
Durarara, I
the
do
sequels.
believe. I haven't watched the sequels, but I watched the first one. I believe it deserved the hype it got at the time, and it deserves to still be a bad cookie. It is very well constructed. It has some very good character writing, like the 3 main characters being simultaneously like rivals and best friends, but not knowing it, which I don't think is a spoiler. If it was, forget I just said that.
It's a show with a very large cast, and admittedly it takes you a while to get into the story because there's so much time being spent like introducing all the characters.
But the core of it is those 3 and the 3 factions that they represent, and then there's the few oddballs that are there, but like
right. But I mean, like, you'll see the same set of events from different perspectives, but that'll take up like multiple episodes of content. So
that's true.
If you're the kind of person that doesn't enjoy, I don't know, taking a long time to really spell out a whole story, then this is not the show for you.
If you like the melancholy of Haruhi Suzuyama, watch this.
The melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya.
I can't. Yes, but
it's got
watch that.
It's got like an urban supernatural kind of mystery crime element to it,
and a headless horsewoman on a motorcycle
with a helmet that looks like it has cat ears.
It's great.
And also, I guess this might not be a good thing, but it reminds me of those movies like New Year's Eve or Valentine's Day, where you have these massive casts of characters that you spend a little bit of time with, and then as the story goes along, they all start to interweave into each other's lives.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a better version of those.
It's like that, but it's still not because Bakano exists, so it's not quite as good as that. But this is just going to be me comparing animes to better animes if we keep going too long. Still, bad cookie, for sure.
And according to Blue Sweater Stories blog, the top-rated anime of 2010 is Angel Beats with 1 exclamation mark. 2010 was apparently the year where you had to have an exclamation mark in your title.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time where that was kind of a common thing, but Angel Beats, never watched it, but I know some people who have.
I just saw it last year in 2019.
Okay.
It's on Netflix now.
Is it still good?
No.
Okay.
Like
Bat-noogie then.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's about a guy who wakes up after he's died and he's in a high school, and it seems like it's basically purgatory, and all the people who are there are fighting against, essentially, they call it God, but it's unclear like what creation or creator is involved. It's basically people who aren't ready to pass on to the next life. And of course, because it's Japanese, there's like a huge hint of like reincarnation, because that's part of a lot of Japanese spirituality. And it's meant to be really sad, because as the show goes on, you learn more and more of the stories of how these people died. And so I've seen other shows that came after this that do a better job of it, but to acknowledge that this was like one of the, I don't know, first ones that to do it, it's certainly noteworthy. But I didn't get the hype when I finally watched it last year. So
fair enough.
Bat-noogie for me.
Okay.
You also put in all caps on the doc here, FMA Brotherhood in the States.
I mean, yeah, it's the year that Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood came out in the States, and
now that is the shorter, more comic book accurate version of Fullmetal Alchemist.
That is not entirely accurate, as it is actually longer than the original, but covers the entire. It is more comic accurate. It covers more of it, but shorter isn't inaccurate either, because it does spend less time on the events. I think you've heard me rant about this probably a number of times, but it's still a great show. I still think it could have been longer to get to kind of build bonds with the characters more and kind of solidify spending more time with them and with their struggles before moving on to all the big action pieces. So like the pacing was a bit off, but it did actually cover the entire series, whereas the original made up an ending because the manga wasn't done and the ending was terrible and people hated it, rightfully so, I think. And so people were very excited that this came and rectified things. But I think also because like the original Fullmetal Alchemist anime made the manga even more popular, and by the time it ended, it had built up so much in popularity that it did do a good job of, it did make it get a second adaptation, which is not a very common thing to happen. The only other show that I can think of, well, there's 2 other shows I can think of that did that, which would be Hunter x Hunter and Hellsing.
Well, Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon both had redos as well.
Yeah, but that's a slightly, but kind of, but they didn't. But they didn't get the show end. Like theirs
is
a
fair.
it's a remake. Like Kai is like Dragon Ball Z is over. We're gonna remake it shorter. This was. They started the show, it was super popular, but then they had to end it because they didn't know where the manga was going.
Right.
And then, because like the end of the first Hellsing show was completely ridiculous. Well, completely ridiculous. Less ridiculous than Nazi vampires, but did not make sense in the context.
Anyway, I'm gonna bring it in here. So just to note some anime movies that came out in 2010. We've talked about Yu-Gi-Oh on this show before, and how, so there's a whole episode on Yu-Gi-Oh you can go back and listen to. But in 2010, there was a movie that was released called Bonds Beyond Time, and it was essentially a crossover between the first 3, the original Yu-Gi-Oh and the first 2 spin-offs.
Yeah.
Which I didn't see it in 2010. I think I saw it afterwards. But
I remember you talking about it and liking it.
Yeah, it was just fun to like see characters that are supposed to be playing the same card game from different points in history interacting with each other.
Even though the rules are dramatically different for every iteration.
Yes,
that's
because
they were trying to sell more cards. They changed the rules.
And I want to give mention here to so Bat Cookie for me on Yu-Gi-Oh, obviously, and then you put Trigun Ballad Rumble.
Yes,
so from what I understand, Trigun is an anime that aired in the 90s. It was like a sci-fi western, and then it got this movie as like a sequel in 2010.
It was not actually a sequel. It was more like a spin-off episode, like. It's one of those, when like they make a movie, it ignores certain of the things that happen in the show, but not others. So it is like, I think it's technically set after the show, but it ignores the fact that, certain characters died in the show. But it's a very fun movie, and it's like, if you don't feel like watching the entire Trigun show but you want to have a taste of it, instead of starting at episode 1 of Trigun, you could just watch the movie. I think it does a good job of like covering why it's good and kind of why the main cast works, and not that the first episode of Trigun is bad, but like it gives you a bit more to go on to.
Yeah, I've seen it. It gets a bat cookie.
Yeah.
And now finally we're going to finish off our recap of 2010 by looking at movies that were released that year.
There were so many good movies. Well, there were a lot of movies that I remember. Not all of them were necessarily good.
Yeah, so
but there were a lot of good movies
from
too.
Box Office Mojo, here are the top 5 grossing films of 2010.
I'm gonna get upset here.
The 5th highest grossing film of 2010 was The Twilight Saga: Eclipse.
Oh, that's not upsetting. That's just, it was the time. Twilight was popular. It was a thing.
This was the 3rd one?
Yeah.
I've never seen any. I've seen I think cumulatively I've seen like maybe 25 minutes of all Twilight movies. But I've never.
I've watched the video. There's a great video on YouTube where they literally count all the staring that happens between Bella and Jacob in all the movies, and that is, I believe,
Jacob the werewolf, or do you mean Edward?
Edward and Bella, and I believe that video is more than 25 minutes long. So I have watched more than 25 minutes worth of.
There you go.
The Twilight series, but it's mostly just the two of them staring.
It's true, and like it's to say it was so popular. Like I said, it's one of the top grossing films of the year.
I mean, love it or hate it, it was Noogie, of course, but it was a big part of culture at that time.
Number 4, Iron Man 2.
Yeah, Cookie. Iron Man 2 was better than 3, I thought, personally.
3
did better. Well, I think there are some people who stand by 3 pretty strongly because of what it set up.
Because it's so Shane Blacky and
and what it did good things for the MCU that 2 kind of just did its own thing.
So as we get closer to present day, we're going to see that more and more movies that are being released are distributed by Disney, and that Disney's taking over more and more of the.
Yeah.
But in 2010, when Iron Man 2 came out, Marvel Studios was actually distributing their movies through Paramount. So if you own like a DVD or a Blu-ray from Iron Man 2, you'll see Paramount on there somewhere. So this actually counts as a distribution movie for Paramount. So it doesn't count towards Disney's domination, and we'll see even here in the top 5.
A simpler time.
Yeah, a simpler time when there was more competition among movie distributors. So yeah, Iron Man 2. It was really the movie that had to do a lot in terms of world building. It had to introduce us to Black Widow and War Machine and set up what Coulson was going to be doing during Thor. And
it did it all. Without
it did
being
all.
a
Some of
terrible
it,
movie.
well, it feels kind of disjointed.
Some of it,
like
but
Whiplash
most
kind of just disappears for a huge chunk of it, and then it comes back when they have to fight someone at the end.
That's true, but I liked Whiplash. He was good in the movie when he was there.
I guess my complaint about Iron Man 2 is that it just feels like a movie by committee. Like it feels like, all right, this movie is all about setting up things to come later on, so we're gonna assemble the story based on our
but
needs.
I feel like it was it was a bigger deal back then than it is now, because all the Marvel movies are a little bit like that now.
But at least they don't feel as much like that to me now.
I don't know. I felt that for Infinity Wars a little bit. Even though it was very well, there were some beats that I'm like, they did this because they had to hit that story beat.
Fair enough. All right, well. Number 3.
Still a bad cookie, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Bat Cookie.
Yeah.
Number 3, Alice in Wonderland with Johnny Depp, directed by Tim Burton.
I'd forgotten that was a thing until I went through the list of movies. I'm like, oh, yeah, Tim Burton and Johnny Depp were still doing things together and not being mercilessly mocked for it.
Yeah, I remember. So I do remember going to the theater to see this, and it just, it felt like your weird. It's just, I don't know. I've never actually watched the animated Alice in Wonderland Disney movie, but from what I've seen of it, it looks very colorful and fun. And this movie seems to suck all that out of it.
I feel like that was kind of the turning point where Tim Burton wasn't quite a parody of himself yet, and then he started to be a little bit. Because I don't know. same thing with Johnny Depp. Like their kind of relationship, working together, doing movies, has now become kind of a thing.
I don't feel like Johnny Depp's making many movies anymore.
Well, I know, but like I feel like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was in that phase where it was like, yeah, it's just a thing. It's just something Johnny Depp and Tim Burton did, and we got to deal with it. But I feel like Alice was in this weird gray zone where it was like still original and still zany and good, but not quite. Oh, it's just a thing they do.
Yeah, and it wasn't quite a
Like,
remake because
yeah.
it kind of establishes itself as a sequel to the animated movie because Alice is like a teenager in this as opposed to a little child.
There is, anyways, the Return to Wonderland and Looking and Beyond the Looking Glass exists, so it was also kind of weird.
Yeah. So I remember watching it and being like, I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it. And it's funny that it made so much money that it's like.
Yeah, that is funny, like that it made that much money. But I feel like again,
I know
when was the last Pirates of the Caribbean's movie?
2018.
Yeah, well, when was the first one?
2003.
2003. So we're like Johnny Depp was still fairly popular at that point, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think the fourth
I don't know.
Pirates of the Caribbean movie came out in 2011, so we'll probably talk about it next week.
Yeah, it was before. Yeah, but that. So it was before he started torching his career with bad movie.
Yes.
Because I'm pretty sure Lone Ranger hadn't happened yet either.
No. Anyway, this one gets a bat-noogie for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
And it's one of two movies that are distributed by Disney in this list. So in second place is the other one, Toy Story 3.
Yeah, I feel like you did an episode on that movie.
We did an episode on Toy Story 4.
Okay. Still a bad
and-
cookie for sure, because...
Well, and this movie holds special meaning for me because it literally came. I don't know how it happened, but it was released in theaters the week I graduated from high school.
Oh, wow.
And so I went and
Yeah.
saw the movie with my parents and my one brother. My other brother couldn't come because he was working that night, and I think he still was mad we went and saw the movie without him for it. It's been 10 years. Hopefully you forgive us now. But I can remember distinctly like the scene where Andy's mom goes into his room and it's all empty, and like my mom was just bawling her eyes out because I was the first one in my family to graduate from high school and move away. So just emotionally, it hit me just the right time.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much done on purpose. It was like the fact that it was released near the end of the school year, and the fact that it, people of our age who did grow up with the first one and the second one, I think it was kind of done on purpose. But also, yeah, it was great. I ended up watching it like about a year later. I didn't see it in theaters, but yeah, it's definitely.
You didn't see it in theaters?
I didn't. I don't see that many movies in theater. Although I started to, there might be a few in the upcoming ones that I have, because that was one of the things in early in my undergraduate, I started just going to watch movies when I was bored sometimes. But before that, it wasn't something like my family did together, and not something I did myself too much.
I know Toy Story 3 was made because when Disney outright bought Pixar, one of the mandates they gave to Pixar was to make more sequels for their successful films. So
Yeah.
Toy Story 3 is a product of that kind of corporate direction.
It worked.
It worked as a finale, and it should have been the finale. And that's all I'll say about that for now. So, weirdly enough, the highest grossing film of 2010 is Avatar. Avatar was actually released in December 2009, but obviously because it was so successful,
It stayed in theaters longer, and
it stayed in theaters throughout January. And actually, in 2010, it made $466 million, and its total gross was like 760. So it actually made more of its money in 2010 than it did in 2009, which of course makes sense because it was only available for maybe a week in 2009 before the year ended. I think it says a couple different things. It's kind of sad to see that no movie that was actually released in 2010 could trump the box office grosses of Avatar. And two, to say that, looking at these numbers, Twilight made 300 million, Iron Man 313, and then Toy Story 3 is the highest grossing of the year
proper.
in 415 million. Maybe this was a time when people weren't going to the movies as much, because as we get closer to the end of the decade, we'll see that a lot of movies make a lot more money than this.
Yeah. I don't know. I remember Avatar coming out, and
I still haven't seen it.
I remember an article being written about, people who were depressed because the real world wasn't as nice as Pandora. And I was like, it was Pocahontas in space, guys. Get over it. Like, I'm giving this movie a bat-noogie. I still don't like it.
I still haven't seen it.
It's not it's not a terrible movie. It's not a terrible movie, and yes,
you had to
it's
think about
gorgeous, but like, it's not a good movie either.
Well, and I think part of why it made so much money is because since it was such an experience and seeing it in 3D. Well, no, it was James Cameron.
That's what I meant. James Cameron.
Do not mix those two people up. But
it had been Spielberg and Cameron.
Oh boy. But yeah, it was such an experience that people went back to see it several times.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest thing why it did so well is because it was one of those movies people wanted to watch more than once. Because movies like that, and we're probably going to hit that at some point in Inception. Like, people were like, oh, I got to go see it twice, 3 times. You got to go see it 4 times before you understand what's going on. And that weird myth that was going on about that movie probably helped it do better at the box office.
Yeah, so in terms of highest gross, Avatar was the highest grossing movie of 2010. Here are some other notable films that came out that year. The 7th highest grossing movie of the year was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, which...
That's the 3rd Harry Potter movie I've watched.
Okay. It gets a bat-noogie for me just because I don't remember enjoying it very much. The second one, it felt like a lot of build-up for Part 2, which came out the following year.
One day I'm going to have to actually watch all of them in order. Yeah, I have seen all of them now, but not in order.
In 14th place that year was Tangled.
Oh, man, that low?
Yeah, in terms of box office, it did not do super well when it came out, which is probably why it took so long for it to get any kind of follow-up. I didn't watch it for the first time until 2015. I was at 2010. I just, outside of movies that I had an attachment to, like Toy Story, I wasn't going to see Disney movies.
Yeah,
but it's a great movie.
Oh yeah, Tangled is great, and it's weird. There's a few movies that year that I was surprised how poorly. Well, not necessarily, because there's one that I know it did poorly, and I know why it did poorly, and I still am upset about it. But
right behind it in 15th place was Megamind.
Yep, that's the one.
So why did it do so bad? Because it's a good movie too.
It is. It's an excellent movie, but it came out almost exactly the same time as Despicable Me, which is also about an evil scientist who's trying to find his heart, and who has minions, but the minions in Despicable Me were more sellable. I don't know. I still look at those two. I'm not saying that Despicable Me is a bad movie.
It's because there was another movie with blue people. That's why.
There you go. We'd had too many blue peoples with Avatar. Like, Despicable Me is a good movie, and it holds its own merits, but I still, at the time and still now, believe that Megamind is a far superior movie.
But hey, at least it beat the 16th place movie, The Last Airbender. The other Avatar movie.
Is it seriously that close?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I can't believe that.
I've never watched this. I just know that fans, and I haven't watched the actual animated Avatar: The Last Airbender series.
Well, watch that, and then don't watch the movie.
Yeah, I've heard the movie is terrible.
There's a number of things, and this has been overanalyzed to death, but you gave M. Night Shyamalan a movie. First mistake. Second mistake, you gave him a movie he didn't write with material he clearly didn't have the same passion for than things he writes. And third, you try to give him an action-adventure movie when all he's done basically is, thrillers. There were so many... That's the one thing, and then, obviously, all difficulties between, adapting TV shows as movies, adapting animated series as live-action series. There was a lot stacked up against this movie working.
All right, let's get some cookies and noogies out here. Tangled, cookie or noogie?
Cookie.
Cookie for sure. Megamind,
cookie.
Last Airbender,
noogie.
And some other notable films, of course, we had The Social Network.
And noogie. It was...
I liked it, Cookie.
I feel like it was a little pretentious.
It's where Jesse Eisenberg mastered the art of talking really fast. How to Train Your Dragon.
Oh, Cookie. Yeah, that was also... And not just because that one is good, but because it is one of the few... I haven't seen the latest one, but it is a franchise that almost has no misses in it. I would say I haven't seen the last one, but all the TV shows that were spin-offs of it were good. All the movies were good. Like, even the video games were pretty good. Like, it is a really solid series. The books were good. Like, there's almost no weak point in it. It's not as amazing or as popular as some other ones, but all How to Train Your Dragon is good.
Yeah, Bat Cookie for sure. Kick-Ass came out in 2010.
Cookie, that was great.
Comic book adaptation of an obscure comic. It's always good.
And it did very well, and it was very good.
Well, it didn't do so well to make it high on our
Nicolas
list here.
Cage.
Oh, rest in peace.
I mean, I made a list of movies I thought were noteworthy, and it was definitely on it. But that list was way too long.
Yeah. Another comic book film that came out that year, Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Like,
it did
Bad
terribly.
Cookie, it did. But I knew that, and it was kind of doomed to do poorly. Michael Cera's not super popular, even though he was perfect casting for Scott Pilgrim. And, like, I don't know, like, Scott Pilgrim was kind of an obscure
I didn't even
graphic
know
novel.
it was based
wasn't,
on a comic when it came out.
I mean, it's a graphic. It's a Toronto-based graphic novel wasn't done at the time. Actually, Thomas Lee O'Malley was still writing. Yeah.
Alchemist.
Well, no, I think he was writing the last one.
Oh,
but you can, if you ever read them, like, the first volume of Scott Pilgrim is almost like frame for like every frame is a scene in the movie just about perfectly, and then the further along you go, the more they had to like modify the story to fit the movie. But like, Edgar Wright is one of my favorite directors, and that movie was amazing.
So Bat Cookie?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I saw it years later, and I didn't think it was as great as people had made it out to be, but I still enjoyed it, so I'll give it a Bat Cookie. Then we have the Prince of Persia Sands of Time movie. I only saw this for the first time last year.
Oh.
My roommate, who people know on the podcast as Professor F, sat me down and had me watch it, and it was enjoyable, but I can understand why it didn't do well.
Oh yeah, I mean, video game adaptations usually make poor movies. Prince of Persia has enough of a story that it didn't completely mess up, but it was still, I don't know. I say it gets a bat-noogie. It's not bad for a video game adaptation movie, but that's not saying much.
Predators came out in 2010 with Adrian Brody.
Yeah.
It's the only Predators movie I've actually watched all the way through, and I really enjoyed it.
I like the original better, but
maybe I haven't watched it. Maybe I would like it better.
The original is you have to watch it knowing it's an 80s action movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, though.
Right.
If you're expecting anything else, you're going to be disappointed. No, I actually did like it, though. I also watched it not at the time. I watched it later when I was watching all the Alien and all the Predator movies, including AVP. And yeah, no, that was definitely one of the good ones. It wasn't as good a sequel to Predator as like Aliens was to Alien, but it was still good.
Bat Cookie.
Oh yeah, Bat Cookie.
Bunch of remakes here. The remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. I never saw it.
I hear good things about it.
I'll toss it a Bat-noogie.
I'll give it a cookie. I feel like Freddy Krueger's made his mark.
The remake of The Karate Kid.
Oh, that's a noogie for sure. He was learning kung fu.
He was learning kung fu. Like, I'm all in favor of like in changing up the dynamic and having him be in a different country, and it doesn't have to be like the exact same thing. But he wasn't even learning karate. Bat-noogie.
Yeah, I feel like there almost wasn't enough similarities to even call it The Karate Kid.
No, it wasn't.
Like,
Wimpy Kid gets beat up a bunch, decides to learn martial arts so that he can fight back. And there
are other movies that have exactly that plot who are not called The Karate Kid, like Forbidden Kingdom.
Yeah. The A-Team.
Yeah.
I remember enjoying it, but not. I'm like, it didn't feel the same.
Oh, no, but it was still like, it was solid for what it was.
Yeah, I'll toss it a Bat Cookie. And then the remake of True Grit as well. The one with Haley Steinfeld.
That one was good. Very good. I mean, I'm not a big Western
could barely
fan,
understand what Jeff
like,
Bridges was saying, but other than that.
But I mean, it worked in this movie for him.
Yeah, Bat Cookie.
Yeah, Bat Cookie.
And then you mentioned Inception, so we should probably finish up and then talk about that. Christopher Nolan's kind of departure from the Dark Knight movies between two of his Dark Knight movies.
Yeah.
It was very impressive for the time, and I can see how he basically picked his cast for Dark Knight Rises from this movie.
Yeah, I personally highly dislike that movie, but I think it has to do with the fact that it was hyped. I didn't watch it like opening weekend, and then people started hyping it, and by the time I went to see it, it had been hyped so much, and I watched it, and I was thoroughly disappointed. It was... It was like, it was a decent movie. It wasn't... I didn't think that anything in it was particularly groundbreaking or amazing, though, which people were all saying it would be. It was well constructed for what it was, but even as far as movies that happen in dreams, I feel like it's weak. Especially because Paprika exists.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have anime films that do it better, but nonetheless, that I think that brings our summary of 2010 to a close. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, it was kind of a blasé year for pop culture, for nerd culture, for geek culture, because most of like the shows we talked about got better after 2010. Nothing that ended in 2010 was super noteworthy.
I mean, Lost was pretty noteworthy. Not
yeah,
necessarily
but it didn't end well. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but people are still going to talk about how Game of Thrones ended.
Yeah.
And 10
then
years from
in terms
now.
of like the movies, it's like, well, Iron Man 2 was the only superhero movie to do well that year.
Megamind was a great superhero movie.
Except it was like 15th place. It didn't
do well, but it was good.
Yeah. And, you know, maybe it was a lot of these films I have now seen in the years since 2010, but I didn't go and see them. I didn't make the time for them at the time. So perhaps maybe everyone was busy in 2010 and didn't have as much time to go to the movies or sit down and watch some of these TV shows. So I guess it's good in the sense that it led to other things that happened later on.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts for you on the year 2010, Beef Pork Ribs?
I was honestly surprised at how many movies I recognized, considering it was 10 years ago, and I tend to forget things a lot. So it might that might just happen to me every week from now on, though. So let's be honest, it might just be my memory that's gone. But I do remember fondly a lot of them, and even like one we didn't mention, but I remember Made Waves, like 127 Hours.
Right.
Like I remember that being a thing and people being excited. So I'm like, that was that year. But as we go on and we see Disney get bigger and see if we do video games and anime as well, I did get more into that further along in university, especially anime. So I'll probably have more of an opinion on a lot of those things too. So looking forward to going on our trek, moving towards the future.
There we go. So it's time to go into the bat jar and look at our mail, except we don't have any mail. So Beef Pork Ribs, we're going to need you to remind everybody how they can get a hold of us.
If you want to to contact the show with a question or an idea for an episode, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. Share our posts on Facebook and make sure to like our page because we want everybody to join us inside the Bat Jar.
We also have a YouTube channel where you can subscribe to our podcast and watch the video versions of the audio podcast. We want to thank everybody for listening. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us talk about all this stuff.
And if we get 1 million subscribers, Average Joe will do a face reveal.
Sure. Why not? So next week, it's already been decided we're going to be talking about nerd and geek culture from the year 2011. Hopefully it'll be a little more exciting than what happened in 2010. We'll find out. But come back to the Bachelor Podcast next week when we talk about just what I just said, the year 2011. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
And I'm Beef Pork Ribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
And, you know...